Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the new Yankee Workshop. For years, we've wanted to build a Windsor chair, and we're finally getting around to it. This is going to be a special two-part program, and this is the chair that we want to replicate. It's a Lancaster County fan back. Now, it may look 200 years old, but it's actually brand new. This was built by Pennsylvania chairmaker Bill Wallick, and it was finished by his wife. Now we're going to go to his shop so we can learn some of their secrets. We'll do that next. Then we'll come back here and I'll show you the Windsor that I built, and then we'll build another one. So fasten your tool aprons and get ready to build a Windsor chair. That's next, right here in the new Yankee Workshop. One of the best kept secrets in Wrightsville, Pennsylvania is Bill and Sally Wallick's chair shop. Now if you can find North 7th Street and walk around a bit, you might stumble upon their showroom, which is filled with their wonderful work. I mean, look at these chairs, some bar stools. And this one, this white painted chair, looks like it's 250 years old. It's only 90 days old. And this is a one of a kind, a double arm Connecticut writing arm settee. And you could build a whole restaurant decor around this piece. And here's one of my favorites, a Lancaster County fan back. We saw one of these in an antique shop in Nantucket a couple years ago, and we fell in love with it. Let's see if I can find Bill. Hey Bill, you got a minute? Now Bill started as a truck driver, then he became a cabinet maker, and now he and his wife Sally make all these wonderful Windsor chairs.
Hello Norm, how you doing?
Great.
You have any trouble finding us?
No problem at all.
Great.
Now why don't you give us a lesson on these Windsor chairs?
Okay.
This is one of my favorites.
Okay, this is a fan back Lancaster County armchair. And you've got 4 legs, 3 stretchers, 2 sides, and 1 medial stretcher, which is usually a Queen Anne. When you go up to the seat, and you have a very nice shaped, kidney-shaped seat. And it's got a tail in the back that's mortised in with 2 long spindles going up to the crest. And you've got your arm post, 2 short spindles under each arm. The arm coming out, and it's attached to the square part of the back post with very nice carved knuckles.
Beautiful.
And you've got 5 long spindles that go from the seat up to the crest. And the crest has what you call a high relief carved ear.
Well, it is a beautiful piece. How do you get started on this?
We start with the seat.
Let's go.
Okay. Norm, what you're looking at are 3 Pennsylvania original chairs, and they all basically have one thing in common. They have a one-piece tulip poplar seat.
Wow, cut out of a chunk of wood like this. Well, I suppose if you were to buy a factory-made chair today, it might be a glue-up. Any problem with that?
The problem I see is when the seat starts to move, the seat can come apart. You'll see the glue joints, and you never get that in a one piece.
So you'd rather build it in a more traditional way.
Right.
Now the seat to me is one of the most complicated parts. There's a lot going on with it, so I really want to pay attention. So I see here you've roughed out the shape for another seat. And what are these layout lines for?
Okay, I placed these lines on here so I could drill the leg holes in the seat.
Okay, so this is the underside, and that can be tricky. I mean, they have to be at a very specific angle. I find that part difficult.
Well, that's why I made up this jig to fit on my drill press.
Jigs. All right, so it's an incline. And what's this stick for?
That is a center line to match up with these lines on the back of the seat.
Show me how you position it.
Okay. Place your mark under the drill.
All right.
And you line up that line with the center line on the jig.
I see, and then you just drill it. All right, let's do it. Okay, so a little glue on that mortise and tenon joint.
I just drive it in with a hammer.
Well, look at this. While we were down in Pennsylvania, a summer shower is passing through, but it's nice and dry in here. And here it is, my first Windsor chair. And I'm pretty happy with the results. One thing that I've learned while making it is that every piece is slightly different, and that's what gives it a lot of character. Now, if you'd like to build your own Windsor chair, a measured drawing will be available with the materials list, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. It'll also include a source for a piece of steam-bent wood to build this crest rail. Now, before we do any woodworking, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Here's the blank for our seat. It's a piece of poplar. The growth rings face up. And I laid out both the top and the bottom using this half template, which will be included in the drawing. It'll locate the holes for the legs, the arm post, the back post, and the spindles, and it'll give me guidelines by which I can drill the holes at the correct angle. Now, you'll note that there's a tail on this chair that fits into a mortise. Here's the blank for that tail, all laid out. I'll make the shoulder cuts for the tenon first. And those are the cheek cuts. All right, with a little fine tuning, there's our tail. All right, there's the blank for our seat, cut to a kidney shape. Now we can drill some holes. The jig that you just saw Bill use is one of the secrets to making this chair, or for that matter, any chair. For the leg holes, it's a fairly steep incline with the center marker. We'll give you a plan for this in our drawings. All I have to do is line up each leg hole and drill them. Now for the arm posts, which come off at a slightly different angle, as well as the back post. So I have another jig, which is a shallower pitch, but the methods are the same. Now for that back post, I need a slightly steeper slope, so I'm going to put this shim in here, tilt the jig up, and drill those. The tail's next, and I'll pin it with a couple dowels. The next thing I want to do is undercut the seat on the bandsaw. I'm going to go all the way around at about 22 degrees, 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom, and then from post to post I'm going to angle it to 45 degrees to make it a little steeper. The next part of this project is probably the most challenging and certainly the most physical, and that's to scoop out the seat. I use some pretty primitive tools. The idea is to leave this point, the pommel, alone. That's the high point at the front edge. Then it scoops down and comes back up to the rain gutter at the back. It also goes from rain gutter to rain gutter in this direction, and these edges have to be rolled. I found that when I built the prototype, it wasn't quite aggressive enough. I have to get this middle down about an inch. Now, while I get started, why don't you watch how a master chair maker gets it done. Where do you begin on this, Bill?
Okay, I'll start here by leaving. I want to leave this pommel. It's called the pommel of the seat.
So that's this part right here. So you're not taking anything away right there.
No. And I'll work a channel back through to the rain gutter, and that channel will establish my depth in my saddle. And then I'll work it both sides to the rain gutter.
So you're working it right up to this little groove, which you call the rain gutter.
Yes.
All right, well, let's see how you do that. It looks like a lot of work.
Well, it'll make you sweat. Okay, I go this way toward the back of the seat to keep from chipping out the front. Here, Norm, you try.
Okay.
Okay, you want to kind of swing it like you're swinging a baseball bat. Follow through. You're doing a great job. Want to go a little bit deeper. Okay, let's change direction here a little bit now. Okay, we'll come in like this to change the channel. or to finish the channel off. So maybe we can go a little bit deeper. Okay, to measure the depth of the seat, we'll just lay a straight edge from across the pommel to the tail and hold the rule up. We got about 1 inch and 1/16. Come down on our working piece, and we've got a little over 5/8, so we got to go down another 3/16. We can achieve that by using a two-hand inch shave. And with this tool, you cut across the grain always, so it doesn't catch on the fiber of the grain, you know. And
Otherwise it'll pull it.
it's sharp enough that it will try to find its own way.
Ooh. So you don't want to dig it in too sharp, it seems to me.
No, that's what I was telling you about the angle.
Well, we're lucky here we have an actual chair as a model to go by, but what if we were going about this blind?
Well, actually, a blind man could do this. You just use your hands.
So you feel it.
Yeah, you feel it like an auto body man would rub his hand over a fender, trying to find the high and low spots and the bumps.
And then just go back to it. Good tip. So now you're dealing with that little rain gutter detail, and you're just using a small gouge. And you're not going too deep. Any historical significance to this detail?
I think it's mainly for design. Probably just did it mainly for design. Just to encompass the spindles.
All right, so I've got a couple legs in the finished seat, Bill, and now the challenge is to lay out and drill the correct angled hole for that stretcher.
Okay, well, there's a couple of tricks involved. To start with, the slice in the tendon has to be turned so it runs perpendicular with the green in the seat.
And that's important.
That's very important because if you put the wedge in with the grain running in the same direction the grain in the seat is, it will split the seat.
All right, good tip.
Okay, so now we'll pick the chair up like this a little bit, and you want to measure for your stretcher.
So you're measuring between those little lines that
the
have
two
been
scribes,
put in the turning.
between the two scribes you put on the legs,
Yeah.
and we have 12 inches. So we want to come in there about 1 inch on each leg.
So that'll be the length of the tenon, right?
That
on
would be
each
the
end?
length of the tenon on each end, so you'd have a side stretcher, it'd be about 14 inches.
Okay.
Okay, now we want to, you ask about the angle, take a straight edge between the two legs, put it on the inside of the mark
Of that
of the
score,
leg,
yeah.
and draw, take a pencil and draw a line, straight line to the center across your straight edge. This will give you your angle, your drill angle. Now, Norm, over here in this drill press I have this wedge, and what we want to do here is line up with a straight edge.
All right, so if I go right in the center of the bit and slide it down, I can see that the layout line is parallel, so if you bring it to the center of the bit and drill the hole, it should be perfect.
That's right.
Great. Well, those fit pretty well. Now, how about the holes and the side stretches?
Okay, take a straight edge again, as we did with the legs, and you line it up with the inside of the mark on the side stretcher, and then you draw a line, just like we did on the legs.
So it's the same technique, but it looks like we'll have to use a slightly shallower wedge.
It's a lot less angle, yes. Okay, Norm, we have a wedge here with a little bit lesser angle for the side stretcher hole.
Check it with the straight edge. There's your pencil line. Lines up pretty well.
Looks perfect. Okay, let's drill it.
Okay. How'd we do, Bill?
I think we did great, Norm.
Well, I'd say we're well on our way to making a Windsor chair. While Bill showed you how to scoop out one of these, I did mine. And I must say, the second time around, it goes a little bit faster and it's a little bit easier. Now I'm using this gouge to carve out that gutter detail that I laid out earlier. Okay. Well, now we're ready to start doing some turning. We need several pieces, 4 legs, 3 stretchers, 2 arm posts, and 2 back posts. I like to use my stand here to hold a sample. Here's the front leg, and I can use that as reference to check diameters and see exactly what the end result has to be. For blanks, I'm using maple. I cut pieces that were square, and then I knocked off the corners to save some time while I do the turning. The first thing to do is to make this round, and for that I'm going to use a gouge. Okay, now that's round, so I can start to put some marks at different events in the piece. For instance, here where the tenon starts, this transition. Now I'll take the calipers and set them to this diameter right here. And using this and my parting tool, I'll make a cut right at that transition. Now I want to size this tenon. It's a 3/4 inch tenon, but I'm not going to use the calipers. I got a really neat trick from Bill Wallick. He just uses an open end wrench, a 3/4 inch wrench for the 3/4 inch tenon. It's a real easy way to get accurate measurements. Now with a small gouge, I can make this cove cut and round over this bead. Okay, we're gaining on it now. This leg is all turned and sanded smooth. The last thing I want to do is put this score line in the leg with my skew chisel, and that's going to help me locate the hole for the stretcher later. Now, before I leave tonight, I'm going to turn these stretchers using similar techniques, and tomorrow morning we'll be able to put the base of this chair together. Well, good morning. Last night I stayed long enough to finish turning all the legs and the stretchers. And now I'm finalizing the seat. I'm smoothing up all the edges, rounding over any sharp edges with a variety of sanders, because this is the time to do it. Once I start assembling it with legs, it's going to be very difficult. So a few minutes more on this, and we'll be ready to move on to the legs. I've just cut a kerf in the tenon of the top of the leg, and it has to be perpendicular to the grain, and that will receive some wedges later to help squeeze the leg in that hole, nice and tight. All right, with the legs dry fit in the seat, the first step is to make sure that these kerf cuts are perpendicular to the grain of the seat. If I were to install it parallel to the grain, when I put the wedge in, there's a chance I could split the seat along the grain. So this is an important step. The next thing to do is to lay out for the stretchers. I need to drill holes for these stretchers between the front and back leg. So what Bill showed me was to take a steel rule and put it across the legs, lining up these inside score marks. And once those are lined up, just draw a pencil line, and that's going to be a guide. Here's the setup for drilling those holes. I've got a wedge, a 5/8 inch bit, and I set the leg on the wedge, take a straight edge, align it with the center of the bit, and see if it aligns with the layout mark. In this case, it does. If it didn't, I'd have to shim it one way or the other until it aligns. Then I drill a hole. Now, one suggestion that Bill had is just let the tip of the drill break through the other side. That way, when I glue it up, there's a place for the glue to release. All right, now these are the front legs. Slightly steeper wedge setup. Now I have to lay out for this medial stretcher that connects the two side stretchers. And because the chair tapers towards the back, these holes have to be at an angle. So once again, I'll use a straight edge, line it up with the inside edge of these score lines on the stretchers, and put a guideline. Okay, slightly different angle, same procedure. Now for the glue up. Just as my plumbing friend Richard Trethewey might do before he glues up PVC pipe, I'm going to put alignment marks at each intersection. That way I know it'll go back together the same way. Now it's time to cut some hardwood wedges to go in those kerfs. This is a scrap piece of beech. I've laid out the wedges. I'll cut them on the bandsaw and then trim them as a group. Well, now I'm ready for some assembly, and I'm going to start with a pair of legs on one side of the chair. I'm putting glue on the tenon and trying to work some down in that kerf that I made. I've also applied glue to the inside of the hole. Now I can slip it in, turn it over. I want to make sure that that kerf is lined up with the marks that I just made. And that's good. Now for the wedge, a little more glue. Get it lined up on the edges. Tap it home. Okay, that's not going anywhere. Okay, with some glue in the holes that I drilled and on the ends of the stretchers, I can spread it out enough to squeeze them together. And then align that witness mark. That's good. And you'll note that the glue has squeezed out through that little pinhole, so we know we got plenty in there. And finally, the medial stretcher. I didn't need any witness marks for this. It can only go in one place. All the angles are on the sides. Now it's time to trim off the top of the legs. I'm using a thin shim of wood so that the piece will be slightly above the seat. It'll also keep me from scratching the seat with the saw. And after it's cut, I'll just take a sander and round it over so it doesn't have any sharp edges. 3/16. Okay, I want to make sure that the chair is going to be level across its width. So I've set it up here on the table saw, which is absolutely flat, placed the straight edge across the chair, and I'm measuring the distance, and it's the same on each side, so I'm okay in that direction. Now I've lifted the front legs up on a piece of 3/4 inch plywood because I want the chair to pitch back a bit, and I had to put some shims under this leg because that appears to be the shortest one, and now it's not rocking. Now if I take a pair of dividers, set it to the widest gap here, I don't want to trim any more than necessary, and scribe a line around the leg there. Now with the same setting, I can go around this leg. All right, the dividers were at 5/8, so if I add 3/4, I want to be 1 3/8. We'll lock them there. And now I'll scribe the back legs so that they'll be 3/4 of an inch shorter. Well, this was my first attempt at a chair like this, and it was a bit challenging, but not beyond the average woodworker. I want to start today on these graceful arms with these beautiful carved knuckles on the end. First thing I have to do is rough out a piece. So over here is some beech and a template that I got from Bill. I've traced it out, and I'm going to cut it at the bandsaw. But before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now you'll notice that the ends of the arms are built up to carve the knuckles. So I'm simply adding a piece of 1/2 inch stock, just glue and a clamp. Let's take another look at our prototype. This top rail is called a crest rail, and if you look down on it, you can see it has quite an elegant curve to it. Over here I have a piece of steam bent maple that approximates that curve. Now it takes industrial equipment to do something like this, a steamer and some really strong steel band clamps to pull this around to form. It would be tough to do in the home workshop. Now here, if you look through the cross section, you see it's narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. What I want to do is take a center line and my template for the shape, just bend it into place and trace it, and I'll cut it out on the bandsaw. I've mounted the crest rail here to the bench and I have a little template to lay out the outline of the ear, and then a washer, a little circle that goes in there. Now, rather than watching me carve this, why don't we go back to Pennsylvania and see how master chair maker Bill Wallick gets it done. So now we've got the crest rail, and there's another bit of carving to do, right?
Yes. We're going to start out with this chisel, and we're going to go around the circumference of this circle by placing it on the outside perimeter of the drawing. You don't have to go very deep here, just around 1/8 of an inch. One thing you do want to watch when you start to cover the grain of the wood, when the chisel's in line with the grain of the wood, it will split the ear up very quickly.
So you're a little more delicate when you're parallel to the grain.
Yeah, you can hit as hard as you want to when you're perpendicular to the grain. And you just want to start in this lower corner and start to shear the wood away.
And you're just angling down from the outer line towards that center.
Yeah, whatever feels good to you. Okay, then I'll come down here to the bottom of the ear, this wide chisel. And I want to work that up. Now what we're doing is shaving the chisel marks. All right, next thing we want to do is follow this line. Which would be the boundary for our ear. Now we want to form a shadow in here. So I take my flat chisel and follow this line. And it only has to be heavy enough that when you rub your finger over it, you can feel the difference.
Yeah, okay.
A nice piece of paper. Sand smooth.
Now, just how perfect are you trying to get this?
Not perfect at all. It's just country furniture. It's furniture that they used in the garden and on obvious places in the house. It's just plain country furniture that was very simple and very comfortable.
After the glue set up on that piece that I added to the arm, I cut the shape out, and now I've just rounded it over a bit with the drum sander. Now for the carving, let's go back to master chair maker Bill Wallick. He really knows how to carve those knuckles. Well, these knuckles are beautiful, Bill. You got to tell me the secrets. How do you do it?
Okay, first of all, we clamp the piece to the table, and we're going to do some lines here to show where we're going to take out a little channel to follow this channel, and then I'll turn it over and do the same thing underside, and we'll use this ball rasp to take this out.
Oh, that's a neat little tool.
Okay, next we'll turn to this short foam, and we'll start to do the work that I couldn't do with the rasp. And again, you go back to it with your fingers and feel it's smooth. Now this is where my Magic Cut file comes in. Now we want to just shape this a little further, make it a little bit smoother. I'm using a piece of 80 grit sandpaper to finish shaping. After I use that, I go to a 120 grit. This will pretty much finish and take out all the scratch marks. Okay, I just flipped it over on the backside norm, and we're going to complete this carving, this trough that runs through here.
So you want that to roll right around the bottom edge.
Yes, I do. So when the person who's sitting in a chair can visualize by putting their fingers the whole way around it.
It's kind of delicate work.
Yes, and you have to be very careful when you're doing this. You don't want to chip any of the inside of the volute away, and you don't want to tear the wood out. You have to make sure you're cutting it. Now again, we separate a little bit and bring this in from this side this time. And just kind of run it right up in with the carving. Okay. Knock down all the harsh edges. Wherever your hands touch on a Windsor, you don't want any harsh edges or sharp edges or anything like that. You want it nice to the touch, and you just sit there and
Massage it.
massage it. Yes, that's a good word. Do what was intended to do with the Windsor chair. I believe they called them worry knuckles. Someone gave it that name somewhere along the line. So anybody who worried would sit there and worry and feel their knuckles.
Bill makes carving those knuckles look easy, doesn't he? Well, here's the ones that I made last night before I left the shop. And what I'm starting on today is to drill this hole to connect to that arm post. I've installed a ledger to support the arm more or less level and clamped a straight edge to the side of the post as a guide. Of course, Bill does this all freehand, but I wanted a little extra help. So now with that guide, I can line up the bit in this direction and this direction, and we'll get a pretty accurate hole. And I'll finish it off with a brad point bit so it doesn't blow out. Okay. Let's see how we did. That's going to be good. Now you'll note that the post is square where it intersects the arm, so I have to notch it. And what I do is put a straight edge across the post, draw a line here, find the center point, and then square off of that. I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch here for additional fitting. All right, now I can scribe that pitch line with my compass. And that's an important line because it has to follow the post. Well, I've rounded over the edges of the arm, and I've also rounded over the back corner of this post. I've put a mark right in the center, and I'm aiming for the other corner, the opposite corner, for a screw. Now, we're not sure if they used screws 200 years ago, but that's what Bill does, so we're going to do the same. Now I'm going to go to a slightly bigger drill and just enlarge the hole in the post. I won't glue this in place now. I'm just going to fasten it so that I can drill holes for the spindles that go under the arm. Now I'm ready to drill holes through the arm and into the seat for the spindles. I'm using a 16-inch long bit, and I like to use a stick of wood as a guide once again. Sort of line it up east-west, and then north-south, and drill very carefully. Okay, now so I don't blow out the bottom, piece of scrap wood. Okay. Now I keep the shank of the drill bit centered in the hole that I just made and drill about 1 inch into the seat. I don't want to go all the way through. Both the back post and the arm post have a kerf, just like the legs, so I glue them in place and then wedge them with some beech wedges. And now for the arm, and this time I will glue it in place. The way Bill likes to install these short spindles is to put them through the arm, glued into the seat, then take a double-edged chisel, which I ground out of an old chisel, split it, and then put in a wedge with some glue. At this point, with the back post and the arms set and the spindles, we're ready to go back to work on the crest rail. So here it is upside down. I've done some layout, and the first 2 holes I'm going to drill are for the back post. I'll drill those about 1 inch deep. All right, let's see how that fits. That's good. Now, using a straight edge, I'm going to line up with the center lines of the holes in the seat and in that tail and mark the angle that I have to drill the hole. We have a drill bit and 2 extensions to make it long enough to reach from the seat up to the crest rail. So I set the point, in this case on the tail first, line it up with the pencil line on the rail, and drill a hole. Okay, now it's time to shape that crest rail. The back of it has to curve up, it gets thin as it moves by the ear. I like to use a block plane, a rasp, and some sandpaper. It takes a little while. One final detail is this little score. A pair of dividers makes that easy. Just scribe it in. Now the spindles for the back of 5/8 inch diameter dowels, and they need to be tapered over about half their length down to 3/8 of an inch at the top. So a gouge, a rasp, and some sandpaper will do the job. Well, now let's put it all together. A dry fit, no glue yet. Well, now I just have to break it apart and do the final glue up. While I do that, I want you to take a look at Sally Wallick and see how she gets this wonderful old finish on these chairs. Well, Sally, your finishes on these Windsor chairs are just unbelievable. I've got to know some of your secrets. How do you get one of these knuckles to look like someone's been rubbing it for 200 years? You even show wear marks in these spindles where a man's belt might have rubbed up against it. You've got chips and dings where they've been moved around, and maybe someone even hooked their heels over that turning. Where do you get started?
Well, we start with an aniline dye. I use the powder form, and it's dark walnut, and mix it with the water.
You make a big jug of it.
I use a brush. I like to hand brush most of what I do. It can be sprayed on. If I have a large order, I will use the spray, but I just like the way it looks when it's hand brushed.
And that'll penetrate pretty deeply into that hardwood.
Yes, it gives it an older feel.
Instant antique.
Right.
Now here's a Windsor rocker.
Yes. The aniline dye has dried on this, and now we have put a coat of lacquer on it.
Why the lacquer?
Well, it helps to seal the dye and also prevents the paint from penetrating the wood
Okay.
too much.
So now that's done, what's next?
Then we start to paint. I use oil-based paints, alkyd,
And sort of a satin.
semi-gloss.
Yeah.
And we start with, we put 2 coats of paint on here. We started with red
Okay.
and then covered that with a black green.
Well, this
now-
seems a little rough to me. Is that okay?
Yes, that's just fine. Now we go on to the next step. And then we do the first distressing.
What
on
have
the
you
chair.
done to this chair? I mean, it's all rough in spots, and it's almost like it's blistered. How did you do that?
Well, we use a semi-paste paint stripper.
Huh. So where do you decide where to put it on?
Well, we put it on the places of the chair where over a period of 200 to 250 years there would be natural wear. For instance, your leg would hit the front of the seat. You might kick the bottom of the chair or rub your hand on the handholds. On the back, your back might rub against it, your head might hit at the top.
So you've studied antiques to see exactly where this happens.
Yes.
And how long does this stripper have to sit on it?
It stays on for about 24 hours, and then we scrape it off.
You're going to take it off now?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see you do some of that.
We start to remove.
Okay. So we see a little bit of the red, and we
Right.
see a little bit of the dye.
Right. And after it's scraped, then we have to take steel wool. I use a heavy grade steel wool
Right.
and rub the entire chair
Okay.
from top to bottom.
So now that's going to get rid of all the roughness.
Yes.
And it's starting to look pretty good at this point. Is that it?
Yeah, it starts to, but now we need to add a 3rd coat of paint.
Wait a minute. You did all this work, and now you're going to cover it up
We're going
again?
to cover the whole thing again.
And what color will you use now?
Well, on these we used a black as the top coat. These have been sitting for 5 days, drying, and they're ready.
I can see where you stripped off the paint. It's sort of telescoping through.
Yes.
So what do you do next?
Well, now Bill Wallick has to distress them for the final time.
Now Bill's gone off to a separate room, which is sealed off, and he's got some walnut shells that he's put in a tank, and he's going to use some compressed air to basically do the same thing you would do to sandblast something. Oh, that worked great. So those walnut shells really just took away the thinnest layer of the paint on the piece. What happens next?
We take it back to Sally.
Now, Sally, you're scraping the top of those buttons off. The sandblaster didn't take the paint off those?
No, there wasn't any stripper on them, and so the paint didn't lift.
But you do want to show wear there.
We want to show some wear there because they would normally push up through the seat and the paint would come off.
Okay, and what's next?
Next, we stain the entire piece.
Again?
Yes, we put this is a regular stain now. This is not the aniline dye.
So it's just an oil-based stain?
An oil-based stain.
And you're going to put that over everything, including the paint?
entire piece, right.
Wow.
Put it on even the underside of the seat.
And do you rub it off after it sets for a while?
I rub it off as soon as I'm finished covering everything. I cover the entire piece and then wipe it off.
Now, what's the color on the stain here?
This is also a dark walnut color.
Now, it seems to me that none of these steps take very long to do, but what extends the process is the drying time. It's almost a day after every step.
Right, and depending on the weather, it can be more than a day. Humidity is very important. If it's a high humidity, it might take 2 or 3 days between steps.
So now just a clean rag and you rub it all off again,
Right,
or
I'm
most of
taking
it off.
taking most of it off, but you see what it does.
Yeah, it makes it start to look a little bit brighter and richer. It brings out the highlights.
Right.
Well, that looks great, Sally. So if we let it dry, is it going to be ready for me to take it home?
Oh, no. Now we have to wait about 24 hours, and then I apply a coat of paste wax.
And just buff it out?
Yes,
And how often would you wax it after that?
as often as you want. You don't ever have to wax it again. If you don't want, just dust it.
It's great. Thanks for all the information.
Thank you.
Oh, don't these look inviting after a long day in the shop? Ah, Bill, they're so comfortable. Sally, they look so great.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all your experience on Windsor chairs with us.
Well, thank you for coming. Come back anytime.
All right. Well, when I know that you're just a phone call away, should I run into trouble back at the new Yankee workshop?
Okay.
Well, here are the chairs that I built, completely finished using Sally's techniques. The final step is a little bit of wax. And look at how those knuckles shine and show the age. This is a project that should be on every woodworker's wish list. If you have access to a lathe and a drill press and a few hand tools, you can build a chair like this. If I can do it, you can do it. So come on, build yourself a couple Windsor chairs. Now let me show you what we're going to build next time. It's called a lowboy, made out of cherry. It has nice brasses, a carved fan in the center drawer, these turn drops, and ball and claw legs. I know what you're thinking, carving legs? That's part of the story, so tune in next time and find out right here in the New Yankee Workshop.
If you enjoyed this New Yankee project, please visit our website at newyankee.com for a complete online catalog of all the other projects you've seen Norm build here in the New Yankee Workshop.